Guys, I really hope that this one helps a lot of you, and I'm very curious, so please leave comments as I go. I want to know if you've ever left therapy feeling like something was off, but you couldn't quite explain why. Or maybe many of you have avoided therapy altogether because of the stigma or the feel of feeling misunderstood. Listen, I've been there, and I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But first, a few months ago, I did a deep dive on why therapy can go wrong for men. That includes the training environments, the cultural biases, the blind spots, all of it. I'll put a link for that in the description, and I stand by everything that I put in that video series. But here's what I learned the hard way. The real danger is not therapy itself. It's walking into it without literacy. It's going in there absolutely blind and without knowledge. Listen, if you assume every therapist understands how men operate or that every approach fits your personal needs, you can lose time, money, clarity, even your dignity, and much more. Maybe even start doubting your own instincts that weren't wrong in the first place, because you outsourced authority without asking questions. So this is not an anti-therapy video. It's a literacy video. I'm going to break down the most common therapy approaches that men encounter, how they help and hurt men, and give you questions that every man should ask a therapist before starting sessions. I've also put everything here into a structured PDF reference guide. It's the therapy types, the screening questions, what to watch out for, and everything else. You can download it from my site that's linked in a pinned comment, so please do go get your copy. Because I want to help men understand the different types of therapy, how, again, each one helps and fails them, and what questions to ask before committing to a therapist.
It's time to all choose your timeline on the roller coaster of life.
So this topic that I want to discuss comes from personal experience and a lesson that I hope others can learn from. I was once dragged to couples therapy that I didn't want, and I didn't believe that we needed it. But she insisted that we use her longtime therapist, a woman that she'd been having sessions and meetings with for maybe close to 10 years. I wanted to choose the provider that I felt would meet our needs. She rejected my request, so after reluctantly agreeing to go to her go-to therapist, I asked that therapist what clinical approach would be used when we had our meetings. She didn't respond to that request. So I then asked her if I could read her master's thesis so I could understand the framework that would shape our meetings and our progress. What is it that we're trying to accomplish and how are we going to get there? She denied my request to read her manuscript. I went to only one session, and that relationship ended just months later. And even as a psychology doctoral student at the time, and with more education than the female therapist 10 years younger than me, I realized something that most men never stop to consider. Therapy is not neutral. Not all therapists are the same. Not all of them are good. Some of them are outright biased and pretentious. The mistake that I made, despite knowing it at the time, and the mistake many men make, was not agreeing to therapy. It was walking into it without establishing alignment. I should never have agreed to anything because I had not secured the right to vet that therapist properly. I hadn't pushed hard enough to clarify what progress would mean for all of us. I simply had not demanded intellectual transparency. So to that end, I want to review the main therapy approaches that you're likely to encounter when you shop for a therapist for issues like low motivation, mild depression, lack of direction, stress, or even maybe relationship dissatisfaction. And I'm focusing on what therapists actually do in the room and how they tend to frame problems. So before you decide whether therapy is right for you, let's learn about the most common therapy models used today, starting with the most common one. The first is cognitive behavioral therapy. Many of you will have already heard about this. CBT is the default model in most clinics and insurance-based practices. It focuses on identifying distorted thoughts and negative self-talk and then replacing them with more adaptive beliefs. For men, this often means examining internal narratives like, I'm failing or I'm not good enough. CBT is structured and practical, but it tends to individualize problems, meaning external pressures can be framed as errors in thinking. CBT can help when you're stuck in rumination, catastrophic thinking, or clearly self-defeating patterns. It restores momentum by tightening that link between thoughts, behaviors, and outcomes. But CBT can fail when it reframes legitimate frustration as faulty thinking. When narratives are misaligned or the environment is constrictive, it may teach you to adjust your mindset instead of renegotiating the situation. And then we have acceptance and commitment therapy. ACT focuses on accepting uncomfortable thoughts and feelings instead of trying to eliminate them. The goal here is to make values-based action even while feeling stuck or unmotivated. So you'll hear language about psychological flexibility and learning to sit with discomfort. It can be powerful, but it often emphasizes endurance over restructuring your circumstances. ACT can help when avoidance, perfectionism, or fear of discomfort are blocking progress and action. It basically decouples mood from action and encourages forward progress, even when you don't feel ready. But ACT can fail men when it trains tolerance instead of evaluation. So you may learn to endure dissatisfaction rather than confront its source, and values language can replace concrete leverage or boundary setting. Next, we have psychodynamic therapy. Psychodynamic therapy looks like recurring patterns rooted in early experiences and attachment dynamics. Sessions here will focus on emotional themes that repeat across work, family, and relationships, maybe other areas of your life. Insight and emotional awareness are treated as the main drivers of change, with action often secondary. Psychodynamic therapy helps men when the same conflicts keep repeating across different areas of life, as I mentioned. Insight can reduce blind repetition and lower emotional reactivity. But it fails when insight becomes the measure of progress, even when behavior doesn't change. So you may understand the pattern without altering the conditions that sustain it. Next is humanistic or person-centered therapy. This model centers on empathy, validation, and unconditional positive regard. And here, the therapist listens and reflects feelings with minimal direction. For many men, it feels like finally being heard. The assumption is that growth naturally follows validation. This one can help men who have rarely felt that they've been understood. Emotional permission can reduce shame and lower internal pressure, especially early on. But here's where it can fail. Validation can replace calibration. When discomfort is consistently normalized, the friction that drives change may disappear, and progress can drift without structure or challenge. Next is motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is used when motivation is low or conflicted. The therapist helps you articulate your own reasons for change without applying pressure. It feels supportive and autonomy focused, but the emphasis stays on internal motivation rather than external structure. And here's where it can help. It works well when ambivalence is the real bottleneck. It helps clarify what you actually want without feeling pushed. But here's where it fails. Responsibility remains fully internal even when external restrictions are draining motivation. You may be coached that you want any change more strongly instead of changing the actual setup that makes it unsustainable. Next, we have solution-focused brief therapy, SFBT. This one minimizes problem history and focuses on what's working and making small steps forward. It has a pragmatic short-term tone that many men respond to. The emphasis is action, not deep analysis. So this one helps by restoring agency, by highlighting what works and building momentum through small wins. But it can stall or fail by minimizing deeper examination, and it can overlook structural or relational larger issues. Progress can feel productive while the core problem remains unchanged. Next, we have emotion-focused therapy, EFT. EFT encourages deeper emotional access, labeling feelings, and reprocessing emotional experiences. Though more common in couples work, it is also used individually. There is a strong emphasis on vulnerability and emotional fluency. Here's where this one helps. It helps men who are emotionally disconnected develop awareness and regulation, often improving communication and relationship clarity. But here's where it fails a little bit. Emotional expression can become the measure of progress. Feeling more can be mistaken for functioning better, even when insight is not translating into leverage, boundaries, or progress. Next, we have integrative or eclectic therapy. So many therapists blend multiple approaches rather than sticking to just one model. So they may mix in several of these that I've just gone over. In practice, this can mean CBT framing, humanistic validation, and occasional psychodynamic insight all in the same session. It can feel flexible, but the underlying framework may shift without being clearly defined, and may be hard to navigate for you as the service recipient. Here's where this style helps a little bit. A skilled therapist can tailor interventions and avoid rigid dogma by adjusting to what the client needs in the moment. But without a clear history of theory of change, sessions can drift. They may get off target. So you may feel supported, but remain unclear about what is actually driving the progress. So let's talk a little bit about the consistent pattern across these models. Most modern therapies optimize for internal regulation, insight, and emotional processing. Those are female-dominated traits. Few of them directly address power dynamics, incentive structures, boundary enforcement, or strategic withdrawal from losing propositions. All masculine traits. For men presenting with general dissatisfaction, for example, therapy often treats distress as something to be managed rather than a signal to renegotiate roles, expectations, or environments. Being prepared for therapy means you don't surrender authority just because someone has credentials. Therapy is a service. You are allowed to evaluate the person and the framework before that framework starts to evaluate you. If you don't establish alignment early, you can spend months adapting to a model that was never meant or built for you. If it were me, and this comes directly from my experience that I mentioned moments ago, here's what I would ask a therapist before sitting for a first session. First, I would ask, what was the topic of your master's thesis or doctoral dissertation, and can I read it? That question matters because it reveals the intellectual foundation that shapes their thinking. Their thesis or dissertation tells you what problems they were trained to see as important, what theoretical models and lenses they were immersed in, and what populations they studied. You don't need to agree with it, but you should know what intellectual soil you're stepping into. Second, I would ask, what kinds of clients did you see during your clinical training or internship? That's because clinical training shapes instincts. If someone's practicum or internship were primarily with adolescents, trauma survivors, or a very specific demographic, that influences how they conceptualize adult male stress. You're not interrogating these people at this time. You're trying to understand patterns that they've actually worked with. Third, I would ask, what percentage of your current clients are men? This one I think is important because it exposes what shapes and calibrates their work. If a therapist rarely works with men, especially men who are navigating status, pressure, divorce, career collapse, or identity shifts, then you're not walking into a room with someone that's immersed in male pattern stress dynamics. I don't know if they would be able to help you. Fourth, I would ask, what's your experience in training working with someone like me? That question forces specificity, not generic empathy and not rhetorical familiarity. It requires a direct experience response. And it also signals to you what you should expect is alignment, not blind trust. And fifth, I would ask, what type of therapy do you primarily use? And this one is important because therapy is not just one thing, as we've already learned. Every approach makes assumptions about where problems live and exist, how they were created, and how change happens. If you don't know the framework that's being used in your sessions and by your therapist, you can't decide whether it fits your personality and your lifestyle and how you think or what you're trying to fix. And beyond those, I would still ask things like, how do you define progress? What happens if I disagree with your interpretation? How do you determine whether a problem is internal distortion or a misaligned environment? Listen, these questions are not aggressive. They are structural. They're informative. They shift the dynamic from passive recipient to informed participant in the interaction. The lesson I learned and hope that I can teach men today is simple. Never outsource judgment without literacy. Yes, therapy can be useful if it's done correctly, but you can't walk into a therapist's room assuming neutrality. You've got to walk in there aligned, informed, and prepared to evaluate whether the approach and the provider strengthen you or suddenly reshape you. You're not hiring someone to interpret your instincts by default. You're hiring someone to help you calibrate them. And calibration requires alignment between you. If the process sharpens you, clarifies you, and increases your leverage, then therapy is, yes, of course, a helpful tool. But if it slowly teaches you to self-doubt yourself, to tolerate misalignment, or to internalize conflict that should, in fact, be negotiated, then you're being conditioned. And that's the difference between therapy as a tool and therapy as a grift. And that difference starts well before the first session. It starts with the willingness to ask those questions that I just reviewed. So if this gave you clarity at all, please hit the like button so it reaches more men who need it. Then drop a comment with your experience and any questions. And of course, make sure you subscribe if you want more structured conversations like this. And also remember, if you want the full breakdown, including the screening questions with the models and summaries that I've gone over, I put it into a PDF reference manual. You can download that free from my site, and that link is pinned in a comment. So thank you. Let me know what you think. I'm excited to bring you more deep content like this.